See, to not act is an action, right? To not act is also an action. So it's not that you can ever remain without acting, because if you choose to not act, you already acted by making that choice. That's why Krishna says in the Gita, you cannot remain a moment without acting at the level of the body mind. So the body mind is always engaged in action no matter what. And if the body mind decides to not act, it will face the consequences of it. That's all. So that is the level at which karma operates. The body mind will, if it doesn't act and takes a fatalistic approach, and because of that the consequences or whatever they are, then it faces it.
But even that is not really a choice, right?
That is also true. That is at a deeper level, even that decision for you to not act is itself again as ordained. It is proven by neuroscience, in fact, that the decision is made before you are aware of it. A few milliseconds before you are aware of a decision, the decision is made in the brain.
MRIs.
Yeah. So what it shows you is, just for those who want to have this notion, it's like there is no such thing as free will, because even if that is meant to happen, that one is meant to take a fatalistic approach, that will happen. If one is meant to act, he'll act.
A past karma only determines, or not determine, only influence what is happening now.
Right.
Our actions that we are going to take is entirely up to us.
It is up to us at a relative level. For all practical purposes, what you say is true, right? We have to function that way. That everything that happens, we take responsibility for it and we act that way. But the important recognition is that things happen, even decisions happen prior to even we think we are making it.
Well, that's because of conditioning. Our brain acts because of our conditioning. Our conditioning is because we practice doing this so many times again and again and again. Our conditioning will make the decision before we consciously aware that we will make decision.
See,
but the decision is not made by you. That's the point.
No, that I'm respectfully disagree. That's what I'm saying. Even chapter 6 in Bhagavad Gita, Udari Atmana Atmanam, you have to decide to improve yourself by yourself.
That's exactly right. See, the thing is, both are true. A good way to look at it is, that's why I always use this nice example from science, which is, there is Newtonian physics and there is quantum physics.
Correct.
At the level of atoms, quantum physics, Newtonian physics is actually wrong because it doesn't apply, right? But Newtonian physics is, for all practical purposes, how we function. It's the exact same thing. Newtonian physics is about cause and effect. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction and all the rest. But quantum physics negates all of that. So, Krishna points to both in the Gita. He says what you just said, but then another place he says, Ahankara vimudhatma karta ahamiti manyate.
Yes.
So he says that the sense of doership comes only because of ignorance. There is no doer in reality. So then the question is, even in the sentence you just said, who makes that decision? Which is the same as self-inquiry, right? So when the question comes as to, so Krishna says before that, in fact, he says, Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashah ahankara vimudatma karta ahamiti manyate. He says the three gunas of Prakriti determine everything.
Yes.
And
But not determine detail, determines the type of action you're going to take.
everything. He says Guna prakrite kriyamanani guna karmani sarvashah. The three gunas of prakriti determine everything you think you are doing. That is the ignorance. So, if you ask now the question with any decision, who then actually decides? There is no entity here deciding, it is Prakriti doing everything. The three gunas operating through conditioning. You said conditioning. In fact, conditioning is all there is at the level of manifestation. You are nothing, you and I are nothing but conditioning at the level of body mind.
I agree, yes.
And therefore, the body is simply a product of conditioning, mind is simply a product of conditioning.
Yes.
Therefore, what can act other than conditioning? Nothing. So that is why Krishna says, Prakriti is all there is and it acts.
But then there's no point.
I think
Then there's no point of any of this study and all of that. We are trying to improve based on our understanding. We're trying to change our way of going. Otherwise, it's just...
No, that is exactly the difference between this pointer and what traditionally is talked about. See, you are right, absolutely. There is no such thing as self-improvement. That's why. This is the direct and radical pointer of Ramana Maharshi or of Gita, in fact. The self can never be improved.
Correct.
The self
true
is...
I can never be improved.
That's it. And
But
there
we're
is no
talking
other I.
about- But we're talking about the mind body. We're talking
The
about
mind body goes through what it goes through based on its conditioning, right? And the important point to recognize there is that there is no self there. This is the repeated pointer of Ulladu Narpadu or of Gita or of all of Ramana Maharshi's teachings, is that the self superimposed on body mind is the root of all ignorance. That's all there is to it. The body mind is always going through time, going through improvement. And the body mind going through improvement, whatever you conceive of as improvement, is relative. One can exercise and become very fit, and then one can trip and fall down and hurt. All of this can happen. Same with the mind. One can learn and unlearn and make whatever happens. But there is no self there. But we think I am healthy today, I am fit, I am unfit, or I am intelligent, I am unintelligent. So that I is the superimposition we are having. The superimposition of I on the body mind is the root of all ignorance. So then the true wisdom comes, relatively speaking, one can engage in doing better things and doing dharmic things and all the rest. And there is value in it. One can go in the relative plane from tamas to rajas to sattva. But even at sattva, one can remain as a in bondage, right? So the direct pointer of Ulladu Narpadu or of any such work is that process of improvement through the three gunas has nothing to do with you.
I agree.
You are the pure self, the pure being who's got no change ever. And when we recognize that, then the body-mind falls in the right place. That's all. Rather than getting identified with the body-mind and saying, I'll get better with it, that is the other way which many religions talk about, and even in the Vedic tradition there are many who talk about that. But that is still being in the ignorance of body-mind attachment. And if that's destined to be the way, it happens. We'll read this verse number 19. Vidimadi moola vivekam ilarke vidimadi vellum vivadam. Vidimadigatku or mudalam tannai unarndar avai tanarndar sarvaro pinnum avai sattru. He says, Vidhi Mati. Vidhi means, we can say destiny or fate or what is ordained. Madi is what you are talking about. which is using one's discriminating power to do the right thing, what is normally called as free will. So it's technically, see, he's very careful to even not use the word, because the funny thing is there is no word for free will in Sanskrit or in any Indian language. Vivekananda once said beautifully, will is never free. You are mixing two, it's an oxymoron. You don't find it in any Indian language, will not have a word for it. Think about it. Because will is conditioning. And what is conditioned can never be free. So you are free, will is conditioned. You want to mix the two. That is free will. And that is non-existent. So he doesn't use the word even there because there is no word. He uses the word madi. Madi means intelligence. I can use my intellect to think I can prevail over destiny. But he says this idea of vidhi and madi, fate and discernment, we can say discrimination, are only for those who take the ego to be real. Either if one thinks I am destined to this, so that's why this also answers fatalism. See, even the one who thinks I am destined to fatalism is still identified with the ego. And the one who thinks I can change it is also identified with the ego. So it's this, the beauty of this is the duality operates in all the levels. So there we saw the duality of knowledge and ignorance. Here the duality of fate and so-called free will. So here he says, the one who thinks I am fatalistic and the one who thinks I have free will are both ignorant. Because they are both only for the ariyada ajnanigalukku. The one who doesn't know thinks I have fate or he thinks I have free will. Vidhi velluma, madi velluma innum vivadathil manam sellum. He says, the idea of whether fate will prevail or my free will prevail is only for the ignorant. To recognize the I, that is the foundation of both fate and free will, and therefore being free of both fate and free will they ever bother with it anymore? So that is the point here. So when we speak of both fatalism or of free will, we are only speaking from the standpoint of body-mind, identified as me. So I take myself to be the body-mind, and therefore I say, I'm either I'm going to be fatalistic, or I say, no, I have free will, I am going to act and do this. And the beauty of this is both of this actually happen as ordained. So when we recognize this, that everything happens therefore as ordained, there is the sense of acceptance. So at the level of body-mind, whatever happens, there is the sense of acceptance. So what does it all boil down to from a practical standpoint, right? That is what probably matters. The practical standpoint is that at any given moment, there is stimulus in front of us, whatever the stimulus might be. And there is intelligence in the system that responds to the stimulus. And if I get out of the way, the intelligence responds perfectly. The problem is, I think I am responding, and therefore, again, as we said yesterday, we have the notion of what's in it for me, and that colors everything. As somebody, even great physicists sometimes, they say, oh, if there is destiny, then why don't you cross the road closing your eyes? What will happen will happen. That's the kind of argument people will make, because that denies the fact that there is intelligence operating every moment. So if you don't think at all and you are present, the body has the intelligence to step out of the way when a car comes. So the one who says, I will go and get myself into an accident, or the one who is thinking and paranoid about getting into it, are both caught in the ego. So the right intelligent way of living is, as he points out here, if the I gets out of the way, then intelligence will act.
I as in the body mind.
the I, that is as in the identification with body mind as I. See, the body has its own intelligence. So for example, take something as simple as eating, right? The body knows when it's full, but I keep on eating, right? So who is stupid? The body is never stupid. The mind is, as in thoughts are not, the false I is the root of all problems. So in every realm, the problem is the I, not the solution, right? So even in whatever we are saying, at any realm, we are learning something, the mind applies itself, it learns, and then it does whatever it does. But after it's done, let's say the results don't pan out the way it was expected, there has to be complete acceptance, because that is what is ordained. That's it. So this is another way of what Krishna puts it beautifully, karmaneva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. You have right to action, not to the result. But that's only a provisional statement, because later he corrects it by saying you are not even acting. Ahankara vimudhatma karta ahamiti manyate. So first he teaches by saying you have right to action, not to the result. Then he says you have no right to action too. Action happens. That's it. So when you recognize that, then you are free. But if you don't recognize that, at least you act without any entitlement to result. But when you freed from Ulladu Narpadu is the direct teaching, and therefore it doesn't even, that is why there is a difference between, let's say, Upadesha Saram and Ulladu Narpadu. Upadesha Saram begins with Karma Yoga and goes to Jnana. First he says Ishwararpitam Nechaya Kritam Chitta Shodakam Mukti Sadakam. Right? He says, do action dedicated to Ishvara, and it results in purifying your mind. And then he goes to inquiry. But here, there is no room for all that. It is just, as they say, the direct shot. So because this is
goes through elementary, middle school, and
right, exactly. This is straight to the top, right? So the point of this is, but there is no contradiction if you really look at it carefully. The important point to recognize is that the sense of I is only provisional when it comes to body and mind. And that provisional sense of I seems to act, and as long as that provisional sense of I is there, one can at least be acting with this, what is called as prasada buddhi, acting with complete acceptance of everything as prasad of the divine. But when that goes away, when we recognize that I'm not even the author of the actions happen on their own, then there is complete freedom. Actions happen, and in fact actions happen perfectly, because the only corrupting factor in actions is the me. So when the me goes away, actions happen perfectly. Till then it happens colored by the identification, that's all.
So, sorry, is this way of looking at it is correct? Going back to the question of what are we doing here, right? That self-improvement, whatever it is, right? In the plane of body, mind, intellect, right? In that plane where we are currently operating from, we're fully influenced by the gunas.
Right.
What stands between us to get to that next plane of consciousness is ego, right? The grip of the ego is what, that I is what is preventing us
Right.
from transcending the mind to get to that next level. So can we say that then the purpose, what is all this self-improvement is, to weaken that grip, right? To weaken that grip by reducing the vasanas created by these gunas, slowly, and then let it happen by itself. Can we say it that way? That's the purpose of all this, is to reduce the grip of the ego so we can transcend. Allow the process to happen by itself without doing anything. Can we put it that way?
Yeah, so it's so let's look at it this way, right? So a good example to look at it is let's say there is sun which covered with clouds, right? And the clouds part for a moment and the sun is seen clearly. And then the next moment again clouds come and cover it, right? And then again it clears by and by. So the important thing therefore to recognize, it's essentially what you're saying, but it's important to recognize that from the perspective of the sun, there is no change. Right? The sun is always shining. And in fact, the clouds are also seen because of sunlight. It is the same sunlight that illuminates the very cloud that hides the sun.
Right.
So similarly, it is the very thought which is identifying as ego, which is hiding the very source of the thought itself, which is our pure being. So it's important to therefore for us to recognize that there is no improvement at all for the self. The self is ever true, ever shining, ever effulgent. The only change is how much covering is there. And that covering is what seems to go over time. Right? But in reality, it is not present. So that's why it's always pointed out that it's available now. We just have to see it clearly. It'll never happen gradually. It may seem like that. But any moment when you are recognizing your sense of existence without the conditioning of thoughts identified as me, you are abiding as your true self. And it is never going to change even after 20 years of practice. It will be the same self. So there is no improvement there. But the amount of thoughts that come and cover it up, the amount of conditioning, that may reduce over time and that may have less of a hold because of things. So there is things. So that is but just wanted to clarify that, but essentially that is what we are talking about. So when we gather, study Ulladu Narpadu or study Bhagavatam, Gita or any of this, it is only to do two things we can say. It's really one, but it seems like two. One is to directly get in touch with our being here and now as the self-evident reality of our very nature. And the second is to curb the propensity to get falsely identified with the body and the mind as me. And that is where satsang helps, that is where all of this helps. Because when we go out into the world, when we speak to people, everybody speaks to you as ego. They don't, so as someone said, it's the ego G that is working all the time, And there are so many ego Gs that are all talking to each other. And even when you are respecting each other, it's the ego G respecting ego G. So that is what happens when we are interacting in the world generally speaking. So what satsang provides, what the teaching offers is the direct recognition that you are not the ego even now. And therefore, this conditioning, so conditioning is at two levels, right? One is the conditioning of the body-mind, as we said, which will continue on. So in Gita, Krishna says, Swabhavastu Vartate. So Ramana Maharshi will he's continued to speak in Tamil. He didn't suddenly pick up a new language just because realization dawned, right? Or things like that, the language, the habits. So the conditioning of the body-mind will go. But there's another conditioning which we have on top of that, which is that I am the body-mind. And that conditioning completely goes away when we recognize our true self. So that false conditioning, removal of that is the purpose of these meetings. So it is not about improving the body mind or making it better or anything like that. It can happen because when the false conditioning goes away, it actually, so funnily enough, makes the body mind also better. Because as we said, we will not indulge in unhealthy habits and so on.